No country has ever attacked every other country. And that's what China has done.
Those are pretty powerful words, what you just said right there.
Beijing has really worked very hard to prevent us from learning what's going on.
What is the level of accountability to them that all the other countries can come out and say, listen, you cost us a lot of money?
The Communist Party of China and the World Health Organization helped spread this coronavirus around the world. How could they not know about it? I mean, they're a World Health Organization. They've got doctors.
What is the motive between World Health Organization protecting China? That's what I'm curious about.
We need to get China out of the UN, out of the World Trade Organization, out of the World Health Organization, and just start to isolate it.
We're relying on them on pharma. We're relying on them on a lot of different things.
I mean, it's sickened hundreds of thousands of people around the world, and it is not done with us yet. That is not a conspiracy theory. This is horrific.
So my guest today is Gordon Chang, the author of Coming Collapse of China, who lived nearly 2 decades in China. You've probably seen him all over TV on a recent interviews regarding coronavirus. He comes from a place of, he went to law school, Cornell University. He worked for 2 big law firms in China. I believe one is in Hong Kong, and he happens to be half Chinese. His father is from China. And so I'm looking forward to going into it with him. Is it a natural virus that came from the, wet market where it's not man-made, it's natural that kind of happened? Or is it man-made, intentionally made to use as a bio-warfare chemical to go against an enemy?
The one thing, though, that's really important, Patrick, is that Beijing has done its best to hinder foreign virologists and epidemiologists from going into Wuhan, the epicenter, and studying this. The World Health Organization sent a team into China. They were there for maybe about 2 weeks, but they were only in Wuhan for 2 days, February 20th and 21st. They only were able to send part of the team. And really, they did not have the opportunity to study the virus itself. I think these were more or less sort of like get-to-know-you meetings. So Beijing has really worked very hard to prevent us from learning what's going on. Look at what happened. This has been, a bug which has ravaged China, and China's leaders have known that. What they have done, though, is really striking. So, for instance, they knew about this in Beijing sometime, maybe first week of December, probably in November. Leaders in Beijing knew that this could be transmitted from one human to the next, because doctors in Wuhan knew that by at least the second week of December. But China's leaders didn't actually admit this to the world until January 20th. What they did was, in that interim, where they knew that this was contagious, one person to the next, they actually tried to convince the world that it was not human-to-human transmissible. And we saw this, for instance, in that January 14th tweet from the World Health Organization, which said, based on information from China, we see no clear proof that this is transmitted from one human to the next. The reason why that's important is because Beijing actually tried to lull the world into a false sense of security. And at the same time, Patrick, Beijing was really working very hard to prevent countries from imposing travel restrictions on China. The way this bug got out of China was people who travel. Beijing did 2 things during a critical period. It tried to deceive the world about how this was transmitted, and it made sure that countries did not prevent people arriving from China. Now, I don't know what was in the mind of Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, but he saw clearly what the coronavirus did to his own country. It crippled China. So if he actually wanted to cripple other countries, he in fact would have done exactly what he did. So he allowed this virus, he actually deliberately took steps to push this virus outside of China to infect and hobble other societies.
Those are pretty powerful words, what you just said right there, Gordon. You just said intentional. So this was not accidental. This was intentional, done by them.
And the question is, well, why would Beijing do this? I can't think of another explanation other than that they saw that they had an opportunity to cripple other societies.
What is the level of accountability to them that all the other countries can come out and say, listen, you cost us a lot of money?
Countries are in possession effectively of assets of China. For instance, China is holding more than $1 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury bills and notes. So we can take those just with the flick of a pen, and other countries can do the same thing. We can't confiscate enough of China's assets to compensate us for the economic damage that we've suffered. But nonetheless, we need to do something to deter China and other bad actors from doing something like this again. We'll never get compensated for this. I think countries need to hold Xi Jinping and other senior Chinese leaders responsible. And if we can ever get our hands on them, we need the 21st century version of the Nuremberg trials.
And what does that look like? What could that look like?
That could look like what we saw with German leaders, with Japanese leaders after the Second World War. And no one, of course, wants to do this, but we've never seen a crime like this in history. No country has ever attacked every other country. And that's what China has done.
Next, the World Health Organization, you keep hearing about Tedros Adhanom, and you're seeing a lot of friendliness with him and China. And he's sat down with Xi Jinping. You've seen this before. I'm not the first person that's bringing this up. What is the motive between World Health Organization protecting China? That's what I'm curious about.
China lobbied very hard for his election as Director General of WHO. He has very leftist tendencies. Maybe there's an answer in there. Well, Bruce Aylward, who is, generally been described as the number 2 in WHO. His formal title is Senior Advisor to the Director General. A couple days ago, he came out with an interview where he said, it was very important for us at an early stage of the outbreak to be able to study this. So we needed China's cooperation, which is really what his message was. So I suppose you could say that for some people, the WHO, they were saying, well, we got to be nice to China, to butter them up so they'll allow us to go to Wuhan and study it.
Where does accountability come into play here?
What we're seeing is, I think, people starting to understand that China is not reformable. And if China's not reformable, that leads to the conclusion that we need to get China out of the UN, out of the World Trade Organization, out of the World Health Organization, and just start to isolate it. We have to say that what we have been doing has not worked. It's encouraged China to be more belligerent, more provocative, more hostile, more dangerous. So we've got to do something else.
Next, how much of this has to do with China realizing, because I think they've even said it, one of their military leaders has said that we cannot go against U.S. when it comes down to power of military. They'll crush us. We don't have that kind of a military that U.S. has. There's no way in the world we can compete with them. So they took a bigger part of their resources to want to invest not in traditional warfare, but more in biochemical, drug trafficking, poisoning, environmental destruction, and computer virus dissemination. How much credibility do you give to that?
100%.
100%.
Look, all we have to do is listen to what Chinese leaders have said themselves. Chinese military officers have talked about this, and we have seen what China has done. So I think that essentially we've got to be really concerned about what they call 3 warfares or unrestricted warfare, which is the title of that book from 2 colonels who are now 2 generals. So they have been trying to undermine our society, and we don't really have to. We can see what they've been doing, but we don't really have to speculate too much, because last May 2019, People's Daily, which is the most authoritative publication in China, it's the self-described mouthpiece of the Communist Party. People's Daily carried a piece that declared a quote-unquote people's war on the United States. And Xinhua News Agency also carried that piece. Xinhua is official Chinese government media outlet. So, they declared a people's war. I mean, how clear do we want them to be? We say that they're not transparent, but as people have said, they telegraph their punches. And that's exactly what they did in this time.
Whether it's the media, whether it's many of these politicians, or even some of the folks who are billionaires from New York or elsewhere, why does it seem like there's a underlying level of discomfort with putting too much blame on China and holding them accountable and almost protecting them, saying, that's not nice, you don't talk to them like that, these are good people, why would you do that? Why is there such a movement going on? And it's very subtle. You almost can't catch it if you don't pay attention to it that way. Why is that going on? Why do you think?
Well, here again, we're dealing with other people's intentions. But my guess is a couple things. First of all, we live in a highly partisan atmosphere right now. And so people are just using whatever they can to club President Trump. So that's, I think, part of it. Also because there are elements in American society that have gotten really rich off of China. And so they don't want that to change. So you've got people on Wall Street, you got people in boardrooms, chambers of commerce. They see much more in common with their fellows in China than they do with other Americans. So there's an elitism, which, it's typified, of course, at Davos. I think that that's part of it as well. But it's really dangerous, Patrick, because what we've got right now is we have a common enemy. That enemy means us harm, and that enemy is attacking us. We're going to have to rally behind President Trump. We're going to have to unify because we've got to protect ourselves, because our republic is at risk.
Next one here. Are we potentially at the beginning of a World War III being created? And if not, will the next World War III be looking similar to what we're currently going through, meaning it being a bio-warfare type of a thing that we'll be dealing with?
That's very possible. What it's done is it has paralyzed societies. And I'm sure that China and other countries have seen what a biological agent can do. Look what it did to the United States. We have a Nimitz-class carrier, the Theodore Roosevelt, now sitting in Guam, taken out of action because some sailors on it have coronavirus. I think the Chinese have recognized that because they talk about it in their propaganda. We have a biological weapons convention. The United States is a party to it. China is a party to it. But unfortunately, there are no inspection regimes in that convention. And we have got to make sure that it does, because right now we have seen the power of a biological weapon. This is what could be what the world's future bioweapons look like. Just a simple virus. Okay,
last part here. I'll give you some names and give me the first word that you think about. Whatever word that you think about, give me the first word. We call this a speed round. Tedros Adhanom.
Yeah, I think that he needs to resign. If he doesn't resign, we need to defund the WHO. What he did was despicable.
Xi Jinping.
Criminal.
Moon Jae-in.
Another criminal. Moon Jae-in wants to, he wants South Korea to be merged into North Korea, and probably on North Korea's terms. So he wants to end democracy in South Korea. Moon Jae-in is one of my favorite topics, actually. So it's hard to come up with just one word for him. But I think that he's dangerous. He's no friend to the U.S. He would love to be a totalitarian. He is moving China and moving South Korea away from a liberal democracy back to an authoritarian state. So what nice things can you say about him?
Any final thoughts before we wrap up the interview?
Our society, let me just repeat something that I said, that we're really at risk. We are going to have to band together because, as Ronald Reagan said, freedom is only one generation away from extinction. Well, now could be a couple of years away from extinction. So we've really got to get together and as Americans defend our society and our way of life.
Gordon, thank you for being a guest.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate the opportunity.